We are live. Welcome back, everyone, to the main stage. For those that missed me earlier, I am Dave Mecklenburg, the Chief of Staff at Wendy, and one of the organizers of the conference. I'm really excited for this conversation. Just hearing about what's happening in some of the other conversations that are going on at the conference, looking at the event chat. One of the questions that keeps coming up is, okay, what do we do with all this technology? How do we manage it? Well, fortunately for everyone, we have a panel devoted to just that on the tech toolbox and how to actually implement all of these technologies. So without further ado, I will introduce Kevin Grossman, the president of the Talent Board and the Candies. He is going to take you away from here. Enjoy the session. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dave. Dave, you plug it in. Right? Isn't that what you do?
Exactly.
Plug it in. Welcome, everybody. Was so glad to be here. I loved earlier when Drew was talking about like doing the whole MTV Cribs thing. I don't think you would appreciate mine guest room / office / cardboard hoarding / Goodwill depository. So I don't think we're going to be seeing mine on the show anytime soon. First, before we get started in the questions, I want to introduce the this great panel that I've got with me. And let's start with Allyn Bailey from Intel. Just spend about 20-30 seconds, Allyn. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Allyn Bailey from Intel. I am the program manager for transformation and design across the global talent acquisition space, and have been spending the last 5 years now, almost 6, looking at the candidate experience and translating that into the experience that we design across talent acquisition. It started looking externally. We're now starting to look at our internal candidate experience. It has a lot of intersections with technology and how we play with technology and build solutions that are going to drive our kind of end goals and matching the right people with the right opportunities.
Awesome. Plug it in. There we go.
Simple.
Jen Terry-Tharp, tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Kevin Grossman. So most of you probably know me from AT&T for the last 20 years. I have been in some capacity, but when I left about 2 weeks ago, I was the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Technology. So I had all of the integrations with testing and vendors and marketing and assessments and sort of all the puts and takes along with our CRM and our ATS. So I have a sense that this conversation today will really kind of hit on some of my sweet spots. And as of exactly 4 days ago, I am in a consulting arrangement with Jovio. So if anybody's interested in hearing a little bit more about that, you can hit me up on LinkedIn after this.
Very cool. Thank you, Jen. And last but certainly not least, Cas Turbak. Welcome. Tell us about you.
Thanks, Kevin. Cas Turbak. I'm at Randstad SourceRight, currently Senior Director there for Tech Strategy. I've actually been at Randstad my entire career in a variety of different HR and recruitment tech roles, implementation, tech support. Certainly the last couple of years been a bit more focused on strategy. And so I'm often the one that's rolling up my sleeves to try implementing and trying out a crazy new technology, whether it's AI or whether it's digital interviewing or assessments. And so really excited to share some of that experience with the group here today.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. So let's dive in. So we've seen some pretty exciting developments in the past 2 years, right, in the recruitment technology landscape, all during a high growth market, month after month job growth, and then this, right? So we're going to be talking through the lens, obviously, of COVID-19 during this conversation. You can't not talk about it, for that matter. And besides the World Health Organization and the CDC and other groups, who plans for a pandemic, right? we don't do that. So based on that, we've also polled our Candy community recently and asking them what's really top of mind when it comes to recruitment and hiring. And obviously, number one so far has been rebooting recruiting and hiring. What does that look like 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the line? Pipelining candidates, of course, even if you're not hiring right now. Virtual interviewing, recruitment marketing, employer branding, D&I, diversity and inclusion, is definitely top of mind. And of course, AI technologies and how that can help drive more efficiencies and automation in the process. So that said, Allyn, let's start with you. Where do we start today then at the beginning when we're talking about putting together this tech toolbox, tech stack, however you want to call it? And what are the problems that companies should be focused on, or should they be looking at when it comes to processes to really get these technologies to help them solve those now? Because it's a difficult landscape right now, right?
Right. It is super challenging. And I think I think you set up the stage well. It's not only a challenging landscape right now, it's a challenging landscape that none of us were necessarily prepared for. And so we were setting up our technology infrastructures over the course of the last few years. I know a lot of people have been looking at how they build out their entire tech stack, right? What is kind of that inflow to be? How are you going to look at the data that's captured during the initial engagement period and attraction, manage that in your CRMs, be able to then leverage recruitment marketing platforms to help you build and engage communities, and then start moving into the ATS framework when you start going into the apply process, right? So we were building those architectures and infrastructures, but they were really being built off of this paradigm that said the job was to manage the funnel, right? How are you going to manage bringing people in and then pushing them kind of down through the funnel? And it was about really trying to get people in the door. With this new switch, I think the biggest challenge that we're going to see is that these technology stacks that are still built for the right things, right? But how to leverage them and who's going to be involved in using them is going to start changing. Technology firms and organizations across the board are going to we're already seeing it, right? There's going to be less recruiters, right? There's going to be less people kind of boots on the ground doing personalized engagement and that sort of work. Technology is going to have to fill that gap. And the architectures that we built, the workflows that we built, the automations that we put into place were really accounted for building these handshakes between people and technology, assuming we were going to have a large people presence, right? People first, technology supplementing. I think the switch now is technology is going to have to take the lead and people supplementing, but in a way that understands that you're going to have to build a technology stack that's about managing your pipeline and not about the end part of the process, which is filling them and connecting them to direct hires. So it starts to switch the game dramatically for us.
Yeah, Jen, I know that your old neck of the woods, AT&T, and like many larger complex organizations have seen a surge in applications, right? Because of the sheer volume of people that are out of work right now, a lot more applications that are happening. And to Allyn's point, so it has to be some shift, right, in the beginning of how you're mitigating that. And we're in the business of no in recruiting, right? We're still saying no to a lot more people that we're ever going to hire. So what else can you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So Allyn made the point that the tech stack kind of stays the same. It's just how you ask it to function for you, right? Like, so let's just start at the beginning, your recruitment marketing. Before, we were casting a wide net because there were so few fish, right? Like, so we were casting a super wide net to get adjacent skill sets for candidates because unemployment was so low. But now, like today, what did they announce today? Another 2 million on the job losses. Like, what's going to happen now is we have an abundance of fish. So your recruiting marketing platform really has to get to a place where it's screening out candidates, not screening in, and it's getting tighter and getting you more qualified leads instead of more leads, right? Like, so things like that. I also think that using the tools that were maybe part of our tech stack that were kind of auxiliary, like video interviewing, right? Like, nobody thinks twice about being sent an invitation for a video interview right now.
That's it.
Right. So the tolerance and sort of just the general way that you use your tech stack to control your cost, your quality, all of those things, I think it shifts a little bit. And you now, instead of using your tech stack to manage your funnel, you use your tech stack to manage the tasks of your recruiters or the cost of your work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Very much so. Thank you, Jen. So, Cas, along those same lines, the organizations are also pulling up more tests and assessments, job simulations, closer along, coupled with the application process to screen out more efficiently as well in the beginning. So what else that along those lines, and what else based on what Allyn and Jen have shared, are you seeing as it relates to how we're solving these problems today with technologies?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've had a huge shift to virtual technologies, whether we're talking AI chatbots, whether we're talking the sort of virtual platform that we're on right now, where we can do events or any kind of virtual conferences or the like. I think Jen hit on a really critical point, though, which is that I think this is a shift in what candidates and what hiring managers are going to be comfortable with. I think if we looked a couple of years ago, when we talk about digital interviewing, or even when we talk about AI-based technologies within the last couple of months, there's an instinctive sort of pushback from some of the teams that we've worked with. I think this, and I don't want to undersell what a critical inflection point we're at, because I do think it's a difficult, challenging environment out there, both for candidates as well as for talent acquisition groups. I do think it's an opportunity as well. I think it's something that we can take advantage of to experiment a bit with these new technologies, to find novel use cases for them, and to really drive to, I think, hopefully a better long-term technology solution that takes advantage of some of these newer things.
Another thing that's fascinating, in a very short period of time, think about how these large, complex organizations that many of you have worked for or have worked for, and that are out there listening right now, that in a very short period of time, you had internship programs, right? Summer internships that went from in-person, lots of on-site campus recruiting to completely virtual, right? And pivoting very quickly to do that, and still having internship programs as well. I mean, it's just fascinating to me how quickly we've adopted this stuff, because we had to. And what'll be interesting to see is in our data at the talent board, I mean, there's going to be some latency there. I mean, in the past, video interviewing, virtual interviewing has been not as prominent as I would have thought, but I know, the rest of this year, the data that we collect, as well as into next year, it's all it's going to be, right, at the end of the day. So Jen, let's jump now to you and talk about, so based on that part of the conversation so far, you're running the TA team, and you've got your team, and you're looking at how do we maximize the technology that we have and maximize adoption, and maybe you're looking at new solutions, whether it's a platform or point solution. What's the role now of getting that implemented and or more adoption in the organization today? What do you do with the team on the ground to get there?
It's interesting. I might have a little different perspective than others, just as I've sort of stepped away from managing that team directly, right? And the reality is, a lot of our tech stack, it really doesn't require people, right? And that may not seem popular, but the reality is, most of us have or are starting to back away from sort of that, let me run a print ad, right? Instead, you just have a programmatic budget, or your cost per click, or your duration-based postings, or whatever. Same thing with your ATS and your screening questions. And so I would maybe answer it a little differently, Kevin, sure. and maybe think about what sort of change management do your recruiters and people on the ground need in order to play their role better, right? So if we take off a lot of these tasks, because they were in-person and logistic tasks, like scheduling interviews and having an open house, or going to a virtual career, or going to a career fair, right? Those all have a way less of a burden now. And now maybe those recruiters need to pivot and be more experience advocates. Maybe they need to help keep people warm, right? Maybe there are some other things in our process that are harder to automate in a high touch, high meaning way, that work could then be shifted to.
But like the Great Oz, behind the curtain, I mean, I still need to have people on my team. You still need to look at the dials and the metrics and what's changing in recruitment over time, right? So they still have to have people managing that at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. And I think that for the people that are managing that, and particularly implementing new things, it's really understanding it's not just about a task, right? It's not about let's get CRM into system, right? Or, let's get CRM launched. It's really about, does my stack decrease the time it takes, improve the quality of the person, decrease the cost, right? Or improve the experience. And where does everybody fit in that, right? Like, I think that that's really where it shifts to. It's not, I think that we will have a little forgiveness in glitchy things, right? Like, I mean, all of us have been on a Zoom meeting, right? I mean, can we just say it's the best and as glitchy as anything, right? And so,
what's Zoom? I don't know what that is.
Right? But I think that this experience has given us a catalyst to agility, and it's given a basic forgiveness for the minor glitches and things.
Oh, agreed. Wholeheartedly. Yeah, I know. My oldest daughter just finished 5th grade yesterday, and it was very odd, but it was wonderful. But everything was virtual. The ceremony, everything was done online, and then we did the drive-through at the school to the diploma or the certificate thrown in the car, and then we drove off with everybody in masks. So, but that was the reality. So along those same lines, Allyn, what else have you done and your teams have done at Intel to manage this adoption, this change management, and to put the teams more effective use when it comes to implementing new technologies and just sustaining that adoption over time too?
Yeah, so I actually think that this has been a forcing function to drive something we've been trying to work on for the last couple of years. A strong belief system that what recruiters, recruitment marketers, sourcers do today, what they think their job function is, or what kind of that classic job function is. We have always believed, at least, and I say always, for the last several years, have believed is going to need to become dramatically different. And I think this has become a forcing function in that ecosystem, right? So I talked about the idea of less people, right? Less people also now means I can no longer sustain a world where I call it kind of bridging both worlds, or putting kind of trying to do the splits, where I was putting one foot in kind of what we would call a traditional recruiting model, very labor intensive, right? And one foot in a technology driven model, right? Where my recruiters and my recruitment marketers and my sourcers, where their jobs are less about these very kind of tactical, task-oriented things that Jennifer was noting, but now they need to be much richer and deeper in analysis, right? The ability to understand this wealth of data that's coming into them from these different systems. Recruitment marketers not only need to be great marketers, but now what they really need to be able to do is to be able to interpret the data and the insights that they're getting from their recruitment marketing platform to determine how they're going to make their next activity. My recruiters not only need to be good at making matches, but making matches now is about translating data and assessment. Not only here's the assessment score, but here are the 3 different assessments we gave. How do you translate that into a common language where you can work with a hiring manager to help them how to calibrate apples to apples? This is not something a computer system is going to do for you. The computer system is going to, or the technology is going to collect data. It's going to help us produce an output that says this is what the data says about X, but you're going to have multiple data points that you have to connect and analyze. And so recruiters are going to have to spend more time learning how to do that. And our sourcers are going to have to become real big configuration and systems experts, right? Yeah. They're going to have to know, and we're starting to work with them now, not only create a Boolean search. Sometimes my sourcers hate me because I preach this up and down, and people may disagree with me. But if you think your future is in being a Boolean expert, sorry, right? Technology can outweigh that in a million ways now, right? That's not how modern search is going to happen. And what modern search is going to require is the ability to configure multiple systems to output the result you're looking for. Now I'm a configuration expert. I'm not a Boolean search expert. That's a whole new set of skills. These are things we started talking about 3-4 years ago, and we've been constantly kind of pushing and pushing and pushing. Now the rubbers meet the road. The splits have stopped, and we're now in the technology-driven recruiting framework, and not necessarily the people-driven. People are now supplementing the technology, which is running the tasks. That means they no longer can get away with kind of old school methodologies.
No, they can't. And I would assume, obviously, you've been doing that with your internal teams, right? They're been skilling up and training to be able to manage that. Same with you, Jen, right? As well at AT&T. So Cas, to be fair to, a lot of this pretty amazing recruiting technologies that we've seen, AI-related smart technologies in the past few years, what, from your perspective, then, I mean, these things are implemented much quicker than ever before, too, right? Especially point solutions. It could be a matter of just a few weeks to get up and running with a chatbot, for example. I mean, there's still people moving dials and adjusting things as you launched it with the data that it's analyzing. But what else would you comment on about what teams are doing today to implement and, again, sustain adoption over time?
Yeah, so I think it's undeniable that the role of the sourcer and the recruiter is going to change. I think we've seen that over the last couple of years. I think we're much more moving to the mode of being flight control or being the conductor of the orchestra, where they're kind of overseeing the apparatus in front of them. I think in spite of that, though, or maybe because of that, it becomes even more incumbent on us who's making the decisions around rolling out technology to get the messaging right. This has been a hard-learned lesson for me, especially over the last couple of years, where I think all too often we use the language of the leadership team to describe the technology that we're rolling out. So this is going to bring efficiency, or we're going to see ROI, or this is going to allow us to be compliant. I think those are all really critical things, and it will deliver value to the business. But best case scenario, you run the risk that the talent acquisition team's not bought in because they don't feel that you're talking their language. In worst case scenario, you're almost creating a little bit of an adversarial relationship between the technology and the users. So what we found from an adoption standpoint, when we position this, it's about contextualizing it in terms that make sense to them, in that has an impact directly on the sourcer and recruiter's daily life. So it's not efficiency. It's, hey, you get to spend a little bit less time doing phone screens, and you get to spend more time with your family, or you get to avoid some of the really repetitive, duplicative data entry that you might have done in the past, because technology is acting as this force multiplier for you. So I think that messaging is critical. And the one other thing I would add too is I think how that messaging is delivered, or who is delivering that, is critical too. It's absolutely critical that there is buy-in from the leadership team, but I would argue that it's more important to also have that message propagated out by the TA's peers.
Sure.
I think having a train the trainer approach, or designating super users on the team, these are some really great ways to start to build adoption and socialize out that message, because it's coming from somebody that the team has credibility with and trusts, rather than them being told this is something that you're being mandated to do.
And don't you think that even goes hand in hand with keeping the hiring managers up to speed as well, right, with their access, which will be much more limited than recruiting teams usually, but making sure that there's that adoption there with the hiring managers as well, and getting that peer buy-in.
Yeah, and that's often more problematic, right? Because the recruiter does it every single day. A hiring manager only does it when he has a vacancy, right? Especially
those who maybe are only hiring once or twice a year. Not on a continual basis,
if that. And so you sort of think about, it may be new, it may not be new to us, something that we did a year ago, but you still have that long tail on your hiring manager training.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's, obviously coronavirus, we all know how much it's impacted everything we do, right? We're on a virtual conference right now. We've been talking about this. How, and Cas, let me start with you this time, and kind of just continuing the thread of what we've been talking about. How else has this impacted how we review, purchase, implement technologies today in recruitment and hiring? Because again, I mean, there's many TA teams that have been virtual way before COVID struck too, right? And maybe there's a core corporate team. But how else has this impacted the implementation cycle of recruitment technologies?
Yeah, I think that what it's done is it's made everybody, or just sort of forced everybody, to be a bit more lean and a bit more efficient with their time and resources. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in of itself. I think, and again, I'm guilty of this as the technology resident nerd at Randstad. I love to go out and look at all these different tools and see where we could possibly fit it in. I think this has really obligated us to get a bit more focused, to outline clearly what those business requirements are that we're trying to solve for. And I think the most important change that it's had is it's almost created an environment where iteration is mandatory as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the past, in there's some systems where this is going to still be the case. Like you can't pilot an ATS, certainly. But I think when we talk about some of these other tools, like artificial intelligence tools or assessments or interviewing tools, starting with a smaller group, whether that's a specific client, a department, or even just one TA, I think that's a way for technology to be able to prove itself out, and then you can snowball that to a larger and larger group. And that's something that we've tried to embrace within our organization, because, again, frankly speaking, just given the leaner times that we're in right now, you're not necessarily going to get approval to move forward with a multi-million-dollar purchase for a new system. You need to be able to show that value more immediately.
Video interviewing was like that for very early on as well, as one of the newer technologies at the time. 10 years ago now, when HireVue first came on the scene, 10 years ago, that it was very much being tested in certain groups, certain divisions of organizations. So that makes sense today as well. I mean, Allyn, we're struggling to model what to do next, right? Because we've never been here before. We don't have a lot of data of going through a pandemic, except for 100 years ago during the Spanish flu, and we didn't have HR technology like we have now. So companies we're all having to do more scenario planning, right? What happens if these set of things happen? We'll do this. What happens if these sets of things? So how else has this impacted your planning and your implementing of technologies with your team, along with everything else we've been talking about?
Yeah, well, I think, what Cas said spoke to me, because I can tell you that, at least from our perspective, and I'm sure many other companies are seeing this as well, in the one moment in time where we have less people and probably need more technology, our budgets and abilities to drive a business case for putting technology in are being halted, right? Yeah. We were in motion with many technologies that have been stopped cold, right? But the mandates haven't changed. So what that's meaning is that we have to go in and look at the technologies that we currently have and revisit our usage models around them. I think that's been our biggest piece for the scenario planning right now, sitting down and saying, okay, what is it we really are going to have to do? What will happen? What could happen in these various different scenarios? What's going to happen if this isn't just a temporary issue and we're not back on college campuses in a year? Right. We are not going to be able to go invest in a video interviewing platform because we didn't already have one. Right. We've been patchworking it together. Well, patchworking is going to have to become more formalized without a new tool in place. What does that look like? Right. So I think that's where we're at right now, is really, and the clarity around requirements and usage models and scenarios, and understanding what the real intent is that you're trying to accomplish is key. And I think Cas pointed that out really, really clearly, right? If you don't know what it is you're trying to do, gone are the days that we can kind of play around with the technology and let's see what it tells us it might do, right? Because that's how I'm telling you, that's how I played with technology. Like, that looks like a cool thing. Let's play around with it for a while. Pilots and small pockets where we put things in place are purposeful. We're testing out very specific scenarios now. We're not just playing around with kind of what might happen. We have clear success measures. They're structured pilots. We know exactly when they're going to end and what decision we're going to try and make afterwards. It's not an explore. So I think that's really what's changed for us, right?
And Allyn, I'm still not going to use Snapchat, so don't ask me to do it.
Right.
It's not going to happen. I'm not doing the filters. I'm not doing the ears.
No. Because that's clearly how we're going to have to do it. We have no other technology platform available to us. So
I like that point, and we've been hearing that from the Candy community as well. Like, how do we maximize what we have today in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and what is it that we may need whether it's point solution or whether we're going to be in the market to have a new system, whatever that is. So Jen, what do you want to add to that?
Just that everybody's at a different maturity level in their technology, right? But as I listened to my peers here talk, it's sort of brought to mind, like, so we can't do everything. Like, we're all geeks and we love technology and we want to tinker, right? But tinkering isn't one of those things that's going to be funded in this sort of realm. And if cost and cost cutting are really a thing, I think taking a really deep look at what we're already paying for and how it can work better.
Yeah.
And then I mean I ran a fairly large organization at AT&T for a lot of years, and the reality is the two biggest costs for a recruiting team are typically labor and advertising. Right? Like, so how can you make better use of your labor so that they are bringing you a higher ROI?
Yep.
How can you reduce your costs at the front end and spend less on things like advertising? You know, all of those things still sort of mesh together. I just think that instead of getting to be trailblazers and finding really new things, we're going to have to be laser focused on getting the most out of what we're already paying for and only investing in things that will save us time or money or improve our quality or experience.
Yeah, agreed. And when it comes to that, to technologies you may already have in place, my wife's solution is unplug it, let it rest, reset button, plug it back in, watch a YouTube video about how to best fix it, and I'm like, I'm just calling somebody. So there you go. So the last thing, and then I think we'll have a little time for questions from the audience. And the last thing that I wanted to ask you all really briefly, starting with Allyn, what about candidate experience considerations? And before we started this, I always bring this up, but I mean, from a candidate's perspective, unless they're in the HR recruiting tech field, they don't really care about the tech stack. They don't care about what you're trying to maximize on the back end. All they care about is getting a fair shake, getting engaged, having communications, and being definitively dismissed or rejected with closure if they're not going to be pursued. And we know the bulk of those happen. I research you, I apply, and that's as far as I'm ever going to get. So that's all automated, that part, right? It'll always be. So, Allyn, what are some of the considerations of candidate experience then as it relates to technology?
Communicate, right? So technology for me right now, if I think about it from a candidate experience lens, is what are we doing with our technologies to automate our ability to communicate? You know, just because I use a machine to help me ensure that you get the communication that you need, it doesn't mean that I need to make that machine sound like a robot when it does it. So going in and spending time, right? Going in and spending time on the messaging that my automation is sending out. What are the triggers that are making that happen, right? Really spending the time to configure appropriately and make that happen. The second lens is not only do I need to communicate to you through this process, but 99% of the people are going to spend 99% of their time in your talent community, in your pipeline, and that's where your biggest level of engagement is going to be. You can no longer rest on the idea that you don't have to nurture or manage those people. And so leveraging technology now to expand out and manage those engagements, keep that data fresh. Yeah. Someday this will be over, guys, and we're all going to need to start matching people to opportunities. Yep. And if you've let your 3 million, I tell my people, if you've let our 3 million people inside our database go stale, well, bad on us, right?
Yeah, you're going to be exactly. Your competitors are going to have an edge.
Right. So the only way I do that is by building an experience for them that lets them feel like we're still touching base, we're still connecting. There's something of value here for you, even if it's not a job tomorrow. What are we doing in that space?
Exactly. Thanks, Allyn. That's awesome. And like Torrin said earlier, don't be dinosaurish.
Right.
Love that term. So Jen, real quick, briefly, what do you want to add to that?
I'm with you on everything Allyn said. The other thing that I would add is that part of controlling that experience is controlling the top end of your funnel, right? Like if you allow 100 people to apply for your jobs, you're gonna have to tell 99 no's. But if you can find good ways to improve the quality, shut off the spigot, right? Like, and only have 40 people in there, now your puts and takes and your sort of reputation management is a little bit easier just from the get-go. Plus your cost is lower, your recruiters have to deal with less, all of those things.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Jen. And Cas, what do you want to add to that about candidate experience considerations when you're either trying to maximize your current technologies or you're looking to implement something new?
Yeah, so I think when we look at this through more of a IT lens, there's still things that we can do on the back end to enable that strong candidate experience. So, I mean, I absolutely agree. Communication is important. I agree that ensuring that they're not falling into a black hole is really critical. In my mind, one of the ways that you do that is you have a very prescriptive process or journey through the technology that's part of the stack, and maybe more importantly, that you don't silo the candidates in these different systems. I think one of the challenges, and obviously your results will vary here depending on how many technologies you have, but as a candidate, conceivably, you could be emailed through an email on LinkedIn and then receive a different email from the CRM, completely separate sort of text message from a text messaging tool, have a separate login for digital interviewing and an assessment tool. It gets to be a bit much from the candidate experience. And I mean, frankly, for the recruiters as well. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think when you think about that journey, integrations is a really important consideration. Again, might be more of a difficult sell in this current financial climate, but having those systems speak with one another will streamline that candidate experience and make it more comfortable for the candidates that are going through it.
Yeah, I can't reiterate that enough, Cas. This idea of purposeful planned engagement points and connecting your experience for these candidates. Just because you may not have full line site integrations in place, we would love to all have that, right? You can still be purposeful about when and how you're going to be engaging with people, so it feels to them like it's seamless. They don't need to know that our stuff is batshit crazy in the background, right? For them, it's like on stage, right? It's like a different picture.
100%. And it's interesting as you guys are saying that. The other thing that comes to mind for me is that you don't need a person to trigger engagement, right? Like it's so infrequently that we actually talk about that out loud. But the reality is you can do duration. Like most of our systems, CRMs or ATSs, you can tell it to send an email every 6 days or whatever. We haven't forgot about you. Check out this, right? So we started to talk about this a little bit, but in addition to having metrics for your recruiters so you can make sure that they're hitting those experience benchmarks, right? Like you got to put some fail safes in there. I call it like the red buttons, right? Like if somebody hasn't talked to this person in 5 days, like somebody needs to hit the red button automatically.
Right. Exactly.
So I just because does somebody know the origin of batshit crazy? I need to understand that right now.
No, but it's my favorite saying, and I have to put it in everywhere I can.
No, I love it because you've driven me into Wikipedia in my mind, and I don't have that. But so we had an interesting comment, real quick. I think we're getting ready to wrap up. We had an interesting comment from the audience about, of course, we all know this. You all have experienced this with your teams. There are some recruiters that just don't want to learn these new skills. They don't want to adopt this new world of, I need to be able to manage the systems that are now working for me. Again, considering the bulk of the recruitment of the funnel, that time it's all going to be automated, right? It's only a much smaller tier of folks that get that human interaction that beyond the screening and the interviewing. I mean, the short answer is those people probably will be out of a job, right? At some point. So how would any of you comment on that last comment?
I comment just the way you did. I mean, I think now is the time, guys. We've been saying this for years leading up to this. Come on, get on board. We're going to help you. You got to start changing where you're going. The world is going to shift on you. The world just shifted dramatically. And I know ourselves and just every other company I'm talking to, there's going to be less of us. And that means the ones that stay are going to be the ones that can survive in this environment.
Right. Right. This is, I mean, it's a downsize, but one like that we've not experienced because it's a healthcare crisis. So, but you have to be able to adapt. And if you want to, be a part of this new world, because it's already been happening. You've all mentioned it in this panel discussion. The technology's already been driving a big portion of recruitment for a long time. And in the past few years, even more so. And now it's super critical and is definitely going to be in the forefront. And we know that the artificial intelligent smart technologies are helping us be more efficient and continue to be more and automate better. And teams gotta be able to do that. Got to be able to run that Oz machine, right, Jen?
Behind the curtain, my friends.
So I think we're timed out, but I want to thank you all very much, because you're all way above my pay grade, and that was a lot of fun to talk shop with you all. So appreciate it, and I hope everybody in the audience had a good discussion.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.